Hi, I am Allie Camaletti, and you are listening to Snack Leadership. I will be talking about everything leadership, broken down into bite-sized pieces. You will hear what different leadership skills look like in organizations and how they can rise teams up or take them down. I help leaders build resilience and improve performance by bringing awareness to opportunity behaviors in my business. Spark your mindset. I provide leadership and sales coaching, as well as team building and guest speaking. My hope is for you to feel inspiration and to create a spark in your mindset. Hi everyone, today we are talking about perfectionism. Perfectionism is the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. I am talking with Ben Easter, the founder and head coach of Lucid Shift Coaching, where he helps freedom seekers to develop the resources, strategies, and mindsets they need to build authentic businesses so that they can experience more meaning, fulfillment, and impact. Get ready to hear what perfectionism is all about. Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to talk about perfectionism.
Thanks for having me, Allie. I'm really excited too.
So, I always like to start off with, what really made you dig into this mindset of perfectionism?
I would say it's something that I think a lot of, especially intelligent people, tend to get bogged down by and slows us down in the world. And so not only have I worked through it in my own past, but I've seen clients again and again in the business world, in leadership roles, really struggling with this thing that tends to slow us down, gets in our way, kind of like it's always like the waiting to pull the trigger, that kind of thing. So I dug into it because of that.
What can you remember? What was really getting in your way that made you first recognize this?
I know for me, it was sales was the one of the hardest things. Like coming into a sales conversation and like, oh, but what if it doesn't go well? And what if I don't know the exact answers to every question that they have? And what if it doesn't close? And then I have to close down my business and then I wind up living under a bridge and it's like all that stuff. But yeah, it was really sales for me. I had a hard time with sales. I had a hard time with marketing stuff too. I mean, those two are being like two sides of the same coin, kind of. Just like having trouble pulling the trigger on like putting up a post on Instagram or launching a blog or whatever, and just like really like tweaking it and obsessing over it for hours, and to the point where I'm like, is this even something I want to do anymore? Maybe I should just close it all down. Right?
Wow. Okay, so that makes me want to know, are you an introvert?
It's funny. I often wonder about this because I think most of my friends would tell you that I'm an extrovert, but if we're going by the where do you recharge kind of thing, I really do. Like I recharge on my night walks where I just talk to myself and I go for these long walks with me and my dog. She's not much of a conversationalist. And and then like just being there's a lot of time that I need to spend being by myself in order to kind of feel at my best, but I can turn it on if I need to be at a party or something. I used to like actually not go to parties, so I think I probably am an introvert because I'd be like
You're an introvert.
I would talk myself out of it. Nah, I'll be fine, I'll be fine, I don't really want to.
Yeah, you're an
Yeah.
introvert. Exactly. Uh, because there's a thing out there about social media and posting, introverts will think over
Mm,
and over before they pull the trigger as far as
mm,
actually posting it. And so
yeah,
that's what made me wonder that.
yeah, nice.
Okay, so with perfectionism, I think of how it worked really well for me in my first business with event planning, right? I had everything crossed and dotted and looked over it 1,000 times. It was smooth. And so it really benefited me. Now,
Hmm.
how have you experienced in cultures where it has benefited companies if used a certain way?
Well, I think I actually like, as an example, the school system for this, because if you think about the way that, like, at least in the United States, where I went to school, you're really rewarded from getting everything perfect. You're like doing things that are like memorizing things, right? You're doing things that are like math. You're doing things where there is a right answer, and that right answer is in the back of the book, and you can get it perfectly right. And so I think there are like certain kinds of situations like those where I mean, it makes sense there. If there are specific right answers and we can see what they are, then, having like a perfect answer could make sense, or at least the pursuit of a perfect answer could make sense. And then there's the rest of the world where, you actually can't plan for a lot of what happens in the world. And having this idea, like going back to my sales conversation, it's like being able to plan for everything that could possibly happen in the sales conversation is just not practical. And if waiting to get to that point is is what I'm doing before I'll get on the call, and there's going to be things that I'm not even going to be able to plan for because I won't know what they are until hindsight, right? so so it's like it's just there are certain areas where there can be a perfect answer. Not a lot of them though, and especially not in the business world, in the world where we're dealing with other human beings, right? Where you can't plan for everything that people are going to do or that you're going to do in a situation.
Yeah, that's so true. I think of a good portion of my business that I started out with was sales coaching, where I literally would go in, I'd listen to reservation sales agents' calls, and I'd score them. And one of the first conversations we had to have is that these percentages you are going to get, you cannot look at like A, B, C, D, F, you just
Right.
can't. Otherwise, it's going to take you down
Yeah.
because you're going to start at 30% potentially with the scoring average. But we're going to build on that and increase it. And it may drop a little bit and it may go up a bit. But being raised in that system of percentages and what's considered failing.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, even what you're doing there with the grades thing, I think this is where the perfectionism comes from, is the school system. Is like they tell you that there is an A, there is a B, there is a C, and that you can and that it's within your control to get those grades, which is really counterintuitive when you're thinking about the way that we learn and grow and develop as human beings. Like my go-to example of this is in learning to walk or talk. Really, these are the two examples that I go to all the time. Like if you see a child learning to walk, you see that they're actually spending more time on their butt than they are on their feet. Like they're really falling a lot. And this occurred to me one day, and I was like, oh, see, so the idea is you follow. Part of why we can't walk initially is because we don't know what walking is. We don't actually have the balance. We don't have the nerves connected in our brain. Like we actually don't know how to do it, right? But part of it is because we literally aren't strong enough to walk. Like we don't have the muscles that we need to walk. But then look what happens every time you get up to start walking and you fall over. What has to happen? You have to do a squat to get back up, and you're actually strengthening your leg muscles as you're doing that squat. And this is crazy because if you think about it, then we don't learn to walk despite falling over. In a very real, very direct way, we learn to walk because we fall over. And if we don't fall over, we don't learn to walk, right?
Yeah.
And so, and this is where you're talking about like coaching these people and like being like, look, you're gonna start at a 30%, right? You're not failing, you're just learning. Like that's what we're doing, right?
And it's embracing that failure, which can
Exactly.
be the hardest part. And that'll take us right into that next question of when you have experienced perfectionism as an all-time high, maybe it's coming from the leader or it's just riddled through the company in a certain way. How has that shown itself to be really destructive?
Well, what you wind up seeing then is paralysis. Like you see that everybody's afraid to act, to pull the trigger. People are wanting to kind of collaborate on things so that they can pass the buck. You're seeing, and that just slows down an organization. I mean, if you ask any leader in the world, do you want people on your team who are ready to go get it and take action and deal with whatever happens and then handle it? Or do you want somebody who's gonna kind of drag their feet, work in teams, never really come to decisions or whatever? Then they would definitely say the first one, right? But if you ask people, do they want perfect results or not? A lot of leaders will say, yeah, we want perfect results. And it's like, well, that's where you're getting that kind of a culture of people kind of throwing others under the bus, just, implicating others, like, like never wanting to kind of step into an ownership role. That's what happens because we're like, everybody's so scared of failure because that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about perfectionism, we're really talking about our relationship to failure, right?
Yes.
And our understanding of what failure can do for us. Because if you're not able to fail, you're not able to learn. That's just the way that it goes. I could give you 100 examples like the walking one or the talking one, which is the same thing. You'll have somebody say a word that doesn't, they're like, what? You're like, what are you trying to say? And then they point to it and you're like, oh, fork, not foot, right? Right? Like, oh, I get it. And it takes the actual making of the mistake for somebody to be like, oh, okay, no, this is the correction that you can have, right? And so we really need that process. And if you've got a team that's scared, that's really living into this perfectionism thing, they're scared of failure, and so they're not going to learn all those lessons that can come from just acting quickly.
One of the things that I have experienced watching people, that maybe there's a leadership person that's like, this person isn't moving the speed I want him to, or doing the things that the way I want him to. And I'll ask, have you given them the freedom to try? And
Yeah.
then they're like, well, I haven't seen them show themselves. And it's
Well,
that you gotta trust first before. Otherwise, you'll never trust and they'll never rise to the occasion. But then we'll go back and we'll talk about, like, where do you think that this might have come from, that they might not be comfortable trying or pushing themselves outside that comfort zone?
mm,
And what it comes down to is some onboarding as well. Did they set them up to win when they started? Or
mm.
was it like failure after failure after failure? And then it was like, you're not doing this right, you're not doing this right. But they were never told how to do it right.
Right. Because the relationship with the failure in that case again is the challenge. It's like if we're look, failures are going to happen regardless. We're dealing with other people, and that's just the way it's going to go. Are they saying, "Oh, this is wrong. Like we really need to see this thing," or are they saying, "Awesome, we just failed. Let's see what we can figure out from this, and like where do we go from this? Knowing what we now know, now what do we do, right?" And it's like two completely different relationships to the same thing, which is like quote unquote failure, right? And that's
Yes.
like this is culture at like every level of the organization too, because that
Yes.
boss sometimes has their boss doing the same thing to them, and you don't really know. It's how this gets to be kind of like a toxic thing that can happen in cultures is if it's happening at every level, like how do we break that chain without like a quorum? We need to get people together and change how we talk about what failure really is, right?
Well, and definitely for that leader to notice that in themselves. I had to have that conversation once. I'll never forget it. And the owner, she asked me, she said, what'd you experience this week when you were on site? And I said, well, your team's going to be really compliant with this software system. She's like, and I said, and they're scared of you. And she kind of gave me big eyes, and we went into like all of the other things that happen in a company when that's the case. And she goes, well, what do you recommend? I said, you get a good manager that can buffer it,
Mm,
that is okay working with you and your perfectionist tendencies, but can buffer
mm,
your team enough from it that they can grow, and that sales conversion will increase when they're in that nurturing environment where they feel like they can make mistakes and learn.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Because we don't necessarily have time to deal with the perfectionism here right now in this office.
it takes a long time.
Yeah,
I will say for me, and that's why I joke that I'm a recovering perfectionist, because I'll notice when it
yes,
comes out sometimes, right? And a lot of times it's watching my daughter learn how to color. I'm just
yeah,
like, oh man, I want her coloring in those lines so badly. And
yeah.
she's all over the place. I mean, Santa had a black face this Christmas, and I'm just like, yeah, that's awesome. Great job, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's okay to do whatever you want to do. But yes, a recovering perfectionist. Absolutely. It's
yeah.
constant mindfulness and work.
One of the exercises that I don't know if this is the time to share it, but one of the exercises that I have come across both for clients, but originally I did this for me. So I had a head injury when I was 19. It's a long story, but basically I lost my social skills and I had to relearn them. And that, I mean, the perfectionism thing there was just terrifying, like social anxiety. What if I say the wrong thing and I get rejected and everything's awful? And again, I'm living under the bridge again. So one of the things that I did to overcome this was I went to the bottom of the down escalator at like a JCPenney's or a Macy's or something like that, and I literally asked every single woman out for coffee. Everyone, you want to go get coffee? No. You want to go get coffee? No. Okay. How about you? You want to go get coffee? Like, and the point was not to get yeses. The point was to get to 100 no's.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I did that until I got to 100 no's. And because what happens is as you get all those no's, you realize like, hey, I'm still alive. Look at that. I'm not under a bridge. Like here I have survived this, you know, what was initially for the first like 15 excruciating experience. Then it got to be like a little bit less excruciating. Then it actually kind of got fun by the end. It was like playful. I actually even got one number. It was a fake number, but
Out of 100, you only got one?
I was really awkward at the time. You got to understand, like I was really dealing with some really deep seated social stuff. So it was really happening. But yeah, I mean, so flipping the script and actually like rather than avoiding failure, actually actively seeking out failure just to anesthetize yourself to the impact of the failure is a really powerful experience for people.
That is awesome. I really like that story.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so your favorite leadership mentor?
I mean, there's just so many that I love, but I gotta say Dan Sullivan is probably like my very favorite guy. Just gets things in a really powerful way. I highly recommend Strategic Coach. I highly recommend anybody check out Inside Strategic Coach podcast if you want to get acquainted with him. But he's just got like some really good ideas.
Nice. Good.
Yeah.
And then how about a quote that you feel embodies this whole concept of perfectionism and this mindset?
Yeah, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'll kind of reiterate and rehash. But perfection happens in hindsight, not in foresight. Like it's looking backwards that we can see the growth that we've done and the results that we've gotten, not looking ahead. And by trying to like plan for it ahead, that's when we get really slowed down, really like paralyzed from action. So I really love that.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And then I like to close with what's your favorite snack?
What is my favorite snack? Honestly, well, so a couple answers. First thing that comes to mind is Chex Mix. But lately, my wife's had me on this cleanse diet, and so we're like really limited lean meats, vegetables, that sort of thing. So I've been really enjoying chicken dipped in mustard with spinach. Just eating that as a snack. A little bit of chicken, a little bit of mustard, like plain chicken, mustard, spinach. It's like really yummy. It sounds weird, but it's good.
No, I think it is, the different acidity, maybe a little bit with the mustard.
Yeah, plus like the saltiness of the chicken, and it's all balanced with the bed of greens. It's actually been a really delightful thing. Sometimes I'll finish with a tomato.
Get really crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And
Yeah,
we will
absolutely.
have all of your information in the show notes so people can reach out to you and follow you. And
Great.
I'm just grateful for your time.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks. Great conversation.
Thank you for tuning in to Snack Leadership. I hope you felt inspiration, motivation, and felt your mindset spark. Snack Leadership is recorded and produced by myself, Ali Camilletti, and music by Shireen Amini.